Dan and Lindsay, it's so great to see you both. Thank you so much for having a chat with TR Unblocked today.
Thank you.
And I feel like it's a big occasion because it's 10 years since you founded the distillery. And I understand that you have the vision that you wanted to make a whiskey that you wanted to drink. Surely you feel like you've achieved that. What has the last 10 years been like?
Well, it's been a long decade, but we've gotten to where we've wanted to get. We have a wonderful whiskey. I do drink it. It's something that I actually, in the privacy of my own home with no one watching, choose over the few hundred that I have in the sitting room. And it's fantastic. I think in the end of the day, it's got to be at the core of your brand.
Something that I really love about Cotswolds is how diverse your product portfolio is. You've got whiskies, gins, liqueurs, other bits and bobs as well. What are you focusing on in GTR right now?
So we're really fortunate that we have 4 products that are exclusive to travel retail. So we launched 2 last year, and that's our Litre Cotswolds Dry Gin and our Litre English single malt signature. And this year we're about to release 2 new other products, which is our Reserve 1 litre and also our limited edition travel retail exclusive Spanish Oak.
That's really exciting. Like, why is now the right time to release these new products?
Well, we started with our 2 hero SKUs, so they're really the flagship products of the business, and through sheer demand we've been asked to build out beyond the normal scope of the portfolio to kind of meet with the expectations and desires from the customers.
Can you give us a bit of an overview about where you are in travel retail right now? I understand that you launched in the channel in 2018, so there's been a bit of time since then.
Yeah, sure. So in 2018, we kind of took small steps into travel retail. Then COVID hit, and thereafter, we've made huge gains in travel retail. We're seeing phenomenal success. Specifically, our strategy was to start out in cruise and ferry sector. It seemed to be the fastest recovering channel post-COVID, and then we branched out into airports too, and that has really been a huge volume growth driver for us.
Yeah, I think that, we're getting back to where we were pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, I think a lot of operators were realizing that you need some elements of interest in your whiskey, in your range. It can't just be the same sort of slightly commodity products that you'll see in every airport. And that just sort of echoes where single malt has been going. There's so many new, interesting makers of single malt in many different countries. And I think when people go through airports, and it's a pretty stressful time, if you're gonna get pulled in, it's gonna be for something interesting and not just the same stuff you can buy anywhere else slightly cheaper. So we started realizing that before COVID, then COVID came and ultimately, it all sort of stopped, and now it's picking up, but in a much bigger way than it did in the beginning.
You mentioned that you're almost back to where you were. Do you think you'll be back to pre-COVID levels this year?
Well, in terms of travel retail, we're way ahead of where we were a few years ago.
Exciting.
Yeah, in a big way. It's gone from being basically over the last few years almost no part of our revenue to probably nearly 20% of our revenue. Yeah.
That's really significant. 20% is like an incredible figure. So where are you seeing the opportunities come from at the moment?
Well, we started out doing a great deal with cruise and ferries, and we found that one of the fastest channels to recover post-COVID, but actually we've seen huge growth coming from the airports now, and we've had some great partners with Avolta, with Lagardère, and so we're seeing it from multiple sectors, specifically from ferries, cruise and airports.
And in terms of like regions or passenger groups, where are you seeing those opportunities?
Well, we've had considerable success in the UK, obviously, but we're already now shipping to much further fields beyond into Europe and even as far as China.
A question for both of you now. What do you think Cotswolds offers consumers in travel retail that other brands just don't?
Well, I think we offer people who are leaving the country certainly a little bit of England to take back with them, something of interest after a great time over here, something new. I think that consumers increasingly are looking for something that's out of the ordinary when they go through an airport. They don't want to see the same things they see in every airport around the world. So we offer something that's uniquely British, uniquely English.
Yeah, and I think on top of the great product, it's the whole experience. So we try to kind of give everything that we can from the Cotswolds. So it's the support to the retailers, it's the engagement for the passengers, it's on shelf, but it's also through brand ambassadors, promoters, bar takeovers, events. So we try to give a full 360 experience.
Yeah, just a follow-up question on that. Something I found really interesting about what you were saying was how people want to take a piece of England back with them, perhaps, but also it's almost like brand England and brand Cotswolds when you're overseas. Did you ever think that being so linked to Cotswolds England would ever limit you in travel retail to being like, a souvenir product for England only?
If I'm honest, would not have expected English whiskey to be the growing category that it is. And I was happy with the idea of becoming a Cotswolds whiskey, simply because the Cotswolds actually is a region which gets nearly 40 million visitors a year. And we've done very well with that in our direct-to-consumer. We get about 100,000 people to the distillery in our stores every year. And so, the airports seem to be a natural extension of those who couldn't make it to come to see us and seeing that name. But in fact, there's now over 50 whiskey distilleries in England, so go figure, English whiskey is actually now a thing, and quite a growing thing too, which is wonderful.
And I'd also say, to add to that, it's also part of the whole whiskey curious. So, the rise of the new world of whiskey approach. So we're seeing ourselves plus other sort of regions really driving that new world whiskey approach too.
Obviously, you're seeing tremendous growth, and it sounds like in domestic as well as travel retail. But to what extent did your big investment from Berry Brothers and Rudd a couple of years ago supercharge your potential in travel retail?
But it certainly helped us with production in our new distillery, which we built specifically because we knew that we wanted to be in a lot more channels and make a lot more whiskey for a lot more years, and that costs a lot of money, and that certainly helped. And Berry's being one of the oldest wine and spirits merchants in the UK, I mean, it was wonderful. Their sort of support, and just to have them aboard, they've seen a lot, gone through a lot.
How much spirit are you producing at the moment?
So we're currently producing somewhere around 250,000, just under 250,000 litres a year, which, again, by Scottish standards, very small.
Yeah.
By English standards, quite a bit. By my own standards, not enough. I hope we'll be able to produce even more, because, again, you are always thinking about, 10 years from now, and if we want a 10-year-old 10 years from now, we have to make it today.
So on the growth of English whiskey, I feel like when Cotswolds, you started it 10 years ago, the category was near non-existent. It was just a handful of makers. And now, as you say, there are over 50 distilleries today. What do you make of that? Where has this growth come from?
Well, I guess I wasn't the only guy to have the idea. Perhaps, I've taken a little bit further, and our ambitions kind of grew and took us to places we didn't originally expect. But I think there's lots of folks who did this out of a love of certain aspects of whiskey, namely quality and some sense of where it's from and how it's made. And so that's what's driven, I think, all of these folks to do it. And what's amazing about English whiskey is that they're, by and large, a great bunch of whiskeys, and all doing things at the top end, mainly on single malt. We've now created an English Whiskey Guild. We have over 20 members. We're trying to get a geographical indicator, a GI, approved for English whiskey. So I think this is a bunch of folks that have ambitions for this to become a multi-generational sort of a legacy.
Which is really exciting. And again, just a follow-up question on that. To what extent do you think having something like a GI will cement English whiskey in the mindsets of consumers as being like a real serious player that, like you say, is here to live on?
I think it's another it's another guarantor of quality. I think ultimately it's tasting it and understanding how it's made, and there's a new generation of whiskey drinkers who actually really care about understanding how things are done, how they're made. And with internet, it's not hard to do, and your social media needs to reflect that. And so that's going to make it grow. But I think a GI basically will tell people, it's made in England, it's not passing off, it's matured in England, and unlike our neighbors up north, if I can get a dig in, the barley actually comes from Britain, which is really important, because that's the main thing it's made in.
And then just to you on that, do you think international consumers understand English whiskey and see England as like, a legitimate whiskey producing nation.
Yeah, absolutely. The feedback and the response we've had when we've travelled globally to all of our events and consumer shows has been unbelievable. They're thrilled to see the brand. They love it. They love seeing the visuals, and especially in further fetched locations. But it's really about when they try the product, it's a winner every single time.
Quite a significant piece of news to come out from you recently has been your wetlands development project. Tell us a little bit about that and what a difference it makes to your sustainability.
Well, the goal is to make 4 times as much whiskey as we did before, which generates 4 times the effluent. So all of a sudden effluent and moving liquids that were sort of the co-product became a big thing. And the idea of the wetlands system is to use a couple acres of land recently acquired next to the distillery to be able naturally to dispose of this effluent and to use the effluent in effect to give rise to a really beautiful and biodiverse wetland, which becomes a feature in and of itself.
Can you give us an idea, if possible, of how it has decreased your environmental impact?
Yeah, well, absolutely. 100,000 liters of liquid, which normally would have had to go out in 3.5 trucks every week, now no longer goes out in 3.5 trucks. Each one of those trucks costs me about 500 pounds, so that saves me money, and it saves the villagers having 3.5 trucks every week going out. It also creates, again, sort of a lighthouse site for anyone in the Midlands who's kind of thinking about, well, how can I use plants to better green my profile or help to... we've seen actually BP refineries, chemical factories using plants. It seems like they say there's an app for that, there's a plant for that. And so we have 16,000 of them right now that are all working to just suck up this liquid and actually make something beautiful.
And how is sort of the sustainability element cascading into travel retail as well?
Yeah, so sustainability is always a super hot topic in travel retail. And, the work and the effort that we've put into the wetlands is a phenomenal story that we're talking about at length here at Travel Retail event in Cannes, and we will continue to do so. And there's some super exciting things happening beyond the wetlands. There's the beautiful meadows, and we encourage all of our customers and passengers and consumers to come to visit us at the UK distillery that we have. In fact, we've just won 2nd year in a row the best distillery in the UK, so we're really proud of our heritage and our home. It's very beautiful, and in the wetlands itself we have a beautiful meadow and flower area that is the home to some of the best bees that you can find, and we now actually produce our own honey, which is available for sale at the distillery too.
Obviously, Cotswolds, you are making waves in travel retail, but I imagine it might have felt like a bit of a fight at some points, because traditionally there's very much been at least the perception that retailers haven't always invested in smaller brands or smaller categories. How much of a frustration has that been, and what would you say to retailers considering looking at emerging categories and emerging brands?
Yeah, we've seen huge support from certain retailers and certain channels, and we've had a lot of support coming from the UK especially, and the teams, not only from the retailers but the airport authorities as well, who also have supported us. Also, the great thing with travel retail is the network of contacts that you have throughout, and they too have been very supportive. For us as a brand looking forward, and one of the challenges that we face is that where we have performed and achieved and demonstrated our worth and our growth in the UK, we want to use that as a springboard to talk from like a local conversation to a global conversation. So as a growing brand, I would be urging retailers who have global accounts and global buyers to open the doors to new trends, to the curious, where clearly it's working, and to brands that really have the capacity and the desire to support them.
Yeah. And would you say that step from local to global, you've kind of already achieved it in domestic markets, and now you're almost trying to do it in travel retail as well? Is that a leap that's already been made? I
think we have a lot of work to do in all of those markets, because we're I think an increasingly known and loved brand, but for every one who knows and loves it, there's probably a few hundred that don't. And that's the job ahead. But I think that, when I look at what we've achieved up until now, we have achieved the creation of a strong brand, and the brand is what really helps sell the product. And as nice as the retailers may be to you, if the product isn't selling, it doesn't have a place. And so I think that what we're seeing in travel retail is showing us that the brand is beginning to sort of really take over some of the work, and we have to continue to invest in it and push it. And it's every bit as hard as making whiskey, because you're in effect doing something with a 10-year payback, and you have to have faith. You have to believe in it, and you have to work very hard. And luckily, we have an incredibly hard-working team that has a lot of faith.
So the big question to wrap up, what's next for Cotswolds Distillery in travel retail?
What's not next? We have huge ambition, huge growth and scale, capacity and capabilities, and so we really want to leverage that. And we're very excited to be here again, launching our new range, and we're now one of the fastest growing channels within our business. We are very excited and hope to really expand on that in 2025.
Watch out, world.